Assalamu alaikum guys, inshallah you're well. So it's application season and pretty soon you'll find yourself being invited to interviews inshallah, which I'm hoping are held in person this year. And that's why I wanted to start a series of videos to give you guys some advice, tips, common do's and don'ts when answering certain interview questions. And today guys, I wanted to start off by giving some general tips and advice that are applicable to any interview setting. Now, when you're invited to an interview, one of the first thoughts that will go through your head is, what am I going to be asked? And if you've applied for a graduate or an apprenticeship role in finance, it's very likely that you will be asked similar or the same questions as your peers. And the reason why is fairness. And this has changed a lot since when I was applying over 10 years ago. And overall, I'd say definitely it's for the better. But back in those days, I remember anything went. You could go into an interview, you'd be asked a few questions, and the director, partner, hiring manager, whoever it may be, was left to their own devices, their own opinions of you, and they were the decision maker with no sort of accountability. So I remember when I applied to PwC in their Southampton office, my interview was for just 10 minutes with the director. He just wanted to confirm that I was human and I could get on with people. But that was back then. Nowadays, firms have a lot more control, structure. They put a lot more thought into the interview process. They want to minimize bias throughout the application process as a whole. They don't want to be seen as giving certain candidates or certain types of candidates an easy ride by giving them interview questions. They want to be fair to everyone. Hence why they will ask the same or similar questions to all of their candidates. So I'd expect a standard interview to last around 30 to 45 minutes. In that time, I'd expect you to be asked around 10 to 15 questions. And if we just take 15 questions as an example, of those 15, I'd expect 10 to be fairly standard interview questions. So common interview questions can be, tell me about yourself, why do you want to work for us, and where do you see your career in 5 years' time? All examples of common questions that can come up. And the remaining 5 questions I'd expect to be down to the discretion of the interviewer. So if they're testing a particular skill, particular competency, some experience they're looking for, they may have a choice of interview questions, say 5, and they may ask you around 2 to 3 questions from that list. So it probably won't be the same questions that will come up. I'd definitely be surprised if I had 2 candidates who went for an interview and they were asked exactly the same questions in a 45-minute interview, but the competencies, the skills, the experiences that they're testing will be very similar. So there definitely will be similarities across the interviews. Now, with the rise of socials, a lot more people are posting the questions that they're being asked online. And there's 2 key reasons for that. Firstly, to share their experiences, and B, to help others. Now, when I was applying, 3 common sites we'd visit to help out with an interview were Wikijobs, Glassdoor, and Student Room. A lot of people set up threads when they're applying for a particular organization on Student Room website, so it's good giving them a visit beforehand. But if you do your research online, the point is that you can get a good idea, I'd say of around 60% of the questions that you're going to be asked beforehand. Now, do take my advice with a pinch of salt, because imagine you're interviewing for a small firm with 1 office. They're going to have less structure in their interview process. It may be just 1 person who interviews everybody and makes the decision. They have a lot more control and are free to ask whatever they like in an interview. So researching online is great, but I'd use that more to give you assurance that your preparation is on the right track. Not so that you can go away and prepare an answer word for word for every question that you've seen posted online. This is where a lot of candidates can struggle, because they only prepare for what they think is going to come up. They're not ready to flex their answers in case they're asked an unknown question. And then when they're in the interview and they're asked something that they're not prepared for, they can struggle, they falter, and they end up failing the interview. So online research is great, but like I said, make sure that you can flex your answers. An example of that is with competency-based questions. Common examples include, tell me about a time you led a team. Tell me about a time when your views were challenged. Tell me about a time when you learned a new skill. All of these are examples of common competency-based questions. And to answer these questions, I'd say you need around 5 scenarios planned in your head, and these should be from a mix of settings. So one of the examples could be school. It could be that you did young enterprise when you were in year 12 or year 13. Another could be work-related. Maybe you have a part-time job. Another could be recreational or sports. Maybe you're part of a football or a cricket team. And another could be an extracurricular activity. Maybe you help out with a charity, a bake sale, or a club or society at university. Once you've identified these scenarios, make sure you're fully prepared for them then. There is a way of answering competency-based questions. We're going to cover that off in a later video. But if you're asked the question, tell me about a time when you learned a new skill, you could say, when I was doing young enterprise, I was managing director of the company, or when I was captain of the football team, I led us to the semi-finals. Or, whilst on a hiking expedition, whilst I was doing my Duke of Edinburgh, I was responsible for XYZ. Now, in those three examples, I was alluding to leadership skills. And my point is that if you know your scenarios well, you can adapt them depending on the question that's being asked. So if you're in an interview and there's a question that you're not quite prepared for, you can adapt one of your competency-based scenarios to help you answer that question. That's why it's important you can flex your answers. I always recommend to candidates, make sure you're interviewing yourself in a mirror, record yourself, get your family and friends to help you out. All of this sounds silly, but trust me, it's better than being in an interview, sitting in a chair, feeling yourself burn up with nerves. Third point is never underestimate the impact of small gestures, because you can probably win your interview over in the first minute. You arrive early, you look presentable. If you shake hands with the interviewer, you're looking at them in the eyes, you're using their first name, you're smiling, and you're maintaining eye contact throughout the interview. Your answers are more conversational than reading off a script. All of these tips will help you stand out and win over the interviewer. One of the tips I'd give to help you sound less structured in an interview is by taking regular breaths. You don't want to be talking at the interviewer constantly, so it sounds like you're trying to read off a script and you want to finish before you forget what you had to say. Storytelling will also help, so making sure that your answer is structured logically from start to finish and making your answer personal to you. So if we go back to the Young Enterprise example, well, a lot of people would have done Young Enterprise in year 12, but how are you going to adapt the answer to make it more personal to you? Finally, at the end of the interview, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions, so make sure you get the most out of it so that you can end the interview strongly. Before going into the interview, I'd recommend having around 5 questions prepared, and of those 5, I'd probably ask around 3 to 4 in the actual interview. Obviously, guys, make sure you're not asking questions that you should already know the answer to. So as an example, what qualification will I be studying for? If someone asked me that in an interview, that would probably set off some red flags in my mind. Make sure the questions are open-ended, because a yes/no answer doesn't help you build a relationship. You're not going to build rapport with an interviewer when they're replying yes or no to your question. So questions such as, what are the challenges that I'm going to face in this role? What have your experiences been like working for the company? Or what opportunities are there available for me once I complete the program? Are all good examples of open-ended questions. Now, these were just some of my tips. As we move along further in the series, I'll provide further advice and guidance on specific interview questions. Inshallah, before we go into next week's video, which will be answering the question, tell me about yourself, make sure you do check out the interview playlist on my channel. There's already a lot of advice and guidance there. But for now, I'll leave it there. As always, any questions or queries, please feel free to comment below or message me on Instagram.